All right. Hi, everybody. David Fogel back with you, CEO of the Symphonina Foundation for another Symphonina Foundation podcast. And it's my delight today to be joined by Wouter Kellerman, globetrotting flute player, three-time Grammy winner. I believe I have that right, Wouter. You'll have to correct me if that's not. I think it's three times. And most recently for Triveni with Chandrika Tandon and Eru Matsumoto. How are you doing?
I'm excellent, thank you. As you might imagine, my smile is the widest it's ever been measured.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me, David.
We
Nice
have
to
to
be
do it
talking
with
to you.
kilometers next time. I don't know. It's pretty wide, powder. But it's always hey, I would say, and I mean this from the heart. The few times that we've had together at Grammy events or talking like this now over Zoom, just in the time that we had to talk before we got started with the podcast. There are many people in the music industry and in our lives who instantly make my emotions better, my feeling better, make everything better. And you're one of those people, and I thank you for that. It's just
Oh,
great to be with you, and like the sun is shining a little brighter every time. So
oh, thank you, David. No,
I really
that's
appreciate that, and I
incredible.
think the world appreciates it too.
Thank you. No, thank you so much. I always say I'm much too old to turn into a diva now. Late, too late. My personality is set.
Well, it's a good personality and don't change anything. That's all right. I have to ask you before we get started with other things. Like we have to clear up one of the world's great conundrums. Is it flutist, flautist, either or neither?
It it can be flutist, flautist, or flautist.
Hmm,
But I think the simplest is just to say flutist because then everybody knows what you're talking
that's a
about.
good point. Yes.
So
What is a
yeah,
flautist?
James Corway, the very well-known flutist, said, I mean, he's Irish, so you might normally say, flautist, but he was like, let's just stick with flutist. Then even people who don't know much about it will still know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm on solid ground with flutist then, and if
Yeah.
anybody gives me a hard time, I'll say Powder told me that it's flutist, and we'll go with that. That's good. I know your latest album, Triveni, was in the best new age ambient and chant album category. And again, congratulations for your Grammy win on that. Great to see that, and for all your other accomplishments with the Grammy Awards and SAMA Awards and other things too. If I remember correctly, starting you were trained classically. So let's talk about how you got to pick up the magic flute.
Yeah, when I was 10 years old, my parents took me to a symphony concert and asked me what I would like to play. And I liked the idea of using my breath as in speaking or singing. I just felt it would be more expressive. And my brother chose the clarinet. And I thought, well, the flute points to the side. It's different than the other woodwind instruments. So I just thought, that must be a special instrument. And luckily, I chose a flute, and I loved it from the first day that I got started. Absolutely loved playing it. That my teacher was incredibly encouraging. She was played such a big role in my life, really. And by the time I finished school, I was keen to study music, but we didn't have money to send me to university. So I had to study something I could get a scholarship for. And my other talent is mathematics. So I was offered a scholarship to study engineering, and which was the only way I could get to university. So I took that. I studied electronic engineering at university, and then started working, and soon tried to swap to music as a full-time profession. But then I had young kids already, and within 6 months, my money ran out, and I and I went back to engineering. That cycle carried on for a long time because when my wife and I split up, I got custody over the kids, and I couldn't tour. So the times when I did become a full-time musician, I couldn't be away from home. So it made it really difficult. So I basically waited 20 years, still playing the flute every day until my kids grew up, and then finally made the full-time tradition change to full-time flutist when I was 44 years old.
Yeah. So the empty nest was you leaving the nest then, actually,
Yeah,
because it was. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They, I couldn't, I was keen to follow my dream, but I prioritized my kids as many moms do. So my story is very similar to many women who look after their kids first, and then after that are able to follow their dreams. But it's quite challenging to start a new career at 44. But it was, in my case, I'd been keeping it up all the time. I went overseas to do flute master classes with all the top flute players in the world, classical. So all that time was developing my classical technique and sound and background. But when I started making my own music, I started crossing over into roots music and world music.
Yeah, so you have a very wide, diverse. I mean, I think you could play anything, Wouter. Actually, I mean, if somebody, maybe you have, if you've done a flute hip hop or a rap or something, you've probably done that too by now. I would imagine, but
Yeah.
you
Yeah, the
know,
flute is actually very versatile. People don't really realize it's super versatile. So you can do just about any genre on the flute. And that's what makes it so exciting to be a flutist.
now let's go for the symphony thing. Then I have a specific flute question for you. So, have you performed? I obviously performed with symphonies. Have you performed as part of a symphony?
Yeah, I played in all the youth symphonies here in South Africa. There was a very strong culture of classical music in South Africa. So I played at the National Youth Orchestra. I was the principal flute of the National Youth Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
But then after I went to study engineering, I did play as a soloist with orchestras, but I never went back to being a member of the orchestra because it didn't pay the bills. It didn't pay the bills compared to my engineering job because
Right.
I had to basically make all the money and still in the afternoons I was a taxi dad. I had to drive my kids around and drop them off and help with the
Very familiar
homework.
here. Yes, I know that story. So, yep,
So
yep,
it was quite good to have the engineering because I ran my own engineering software company in the mornings.
yeah.
Only worked half day, and then the afternoons was for my kids, and evenings I managed to fit in some flute playing.
Yeah, that sounds great. So when we see you with videos performing, oftentimes you have a wide assortment of different flutes. So there's
Yeah,
what I would call like a standard flute, the thing that you think of when someone's playing a flute, which probably
yeah.
has its own name. And then there's like a saxophone, I suppose. There's a bass flute and maybe a baritone flute. I don't know. So what are all the flutes? I think we talked with Joanne Lazaro earlier in our podcast series, who's another great flutist.
Yeah, I
Um,
know.
yeah, but I think she set me straight on this, but I'm not sure I remember. So let's go through them.
Yeah, it's the normal C flute, which is like the transverse flute or the orchestral flute that people know.
Mhm.
And then there's the alto flute, and then there's a bass flute, and there's a contrabass flute, the deepest one, and then at the right at the top you get the piccolo. So those are more it's kind of traditional. The contrabass flute is not so much traditional. Not many people play it because you can't really play it in an orchestra because it's very soft. You don't really hear it. So, but it amplified, it's amazing. The contrabass flute is super tall, it's taller than I am. So, and it makes a exquisitely beautiful low sound, and it can also do some nice kettle drum effects by just using the pads or using percussive techniques. So those are kind of all the Western flutes, but then you get all the
Mm,
ethnic flutes. I
yes.
play a bunch of the Indian flutes, and then there's the Chinese flutes, some African flutes, the American Indian flutes. I play a little fife, which is a Yamaha $10 children's flute, plastic flute, but it makes a beautiful sound. And so there are many, many flutes to explore.
Yeah. So that's one thing as a woodwind player, and people who know me know I play sax too. But as a woodwind player in the sax realm, we have a wide range from soprano or even sopranino, but soprano, let's say at the top, not too many sopraninos around, but down to baritone. There's a bass saxophone too. You hardly ever see it, but it's really played in a useful way in jazz, let's say, right? Each horn has its own purpose. And I
Yeah.
always thought for the orchestra, particularly when we get to the woodwinds, it's like once you get below a certain range around middle C-ish, then your clarinet can help you a little bit, and then you kind of switch over to the bassoon. And if you want that mellower thing, not the nasally thing of the bassoon, you have to go to bass clarinet. And then it's kind of missing that flute part, like you just said. You kind of have to amplify it. But I don't see anything wrong with that in an orchestra setting. Why not just put a microphone on everything and you can mix it however it's supposed to sound? You don't have to do it like it's the 1800s and we don't have electricity.
Exactly. The interesting thing is, just recently we did Beethoven's Ninth Symphony in South Africa. So they called they created this symphony orchestra called the Mzansi Youth Orchestra, the Mzansi Symphony Orchestra, which takes all the best players from all the different symphony orchestras in South Africa, and all these South Africans abroad, and bring them back to South Africa to create like the top class, so the highest level South African symphony orchestra you can find. So they did Beethoven Ninth, and then they asked me to write and perform music between the movements,
Ah,
which is, I would consider sacrilege,
yeah,
because the movements are so beautifully written. But the philosophy was that, like a Beethoven's Ninth Symphony performed in South Africa should be slightly different than performed in Europe, you know. And then I used some of the low flutes and we amplified it. It actually worked beautifully. To my surprise, I was very scared to be, the classical police
yeah,
was going to the to the cleaners, but we had generally very good reviews, and it actually worked really well. So I do agree. I think the low flutes, because it's kind of a mellower low sound. So if you amplify it, then there's a whole kind of coloring that you can add to the
yeah,
symphony orchestra that hasn't been available before.
yeah. How heavy is a contrabass flute?
It's pretty heavy. I mean, it's on a stand. It's
It's on a
like
stand, yeah. I mean,
so
does it take more than one person to bring it to the orchestra? How have like,
no,
or no?
no, no,
Okay, all right. You
no, no,
can,
no,
yeah.
it's less than a cello.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
perfectly able-bodied person should be able to do it
yeah,
then. Okay,
yeah,
that's well. Sometimes you have to wonder. These things look very big, but they don't have to be super heavy. So
yeah,
and
yeah.
I
No, it's
see.
actually not, considering how big they are. It's not very heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I see you out in location with your festive garb on and playing and the videos going, and I'm wondering, gosh, how many people did it take to get that instrument out there for Wouter to play it? But maybe it was just you. That's okay. So that's good.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you what I mean. You have so many special performances, and to me, a numbers thing is special, which I think for one of the World Cup soccer tournaments, you did the closing ceremony to an audience of something like 900 million people
yeah,
live, which is, I mean, I don't know who beats that audience, but
yeah.
that's
No, that was
got to ask you what it's like to play for 900 million people.
yeah. It was. It was really scary.
I bet.
700 people, yeah, plus the stadium of 83,000 people live, you know. So you're in the, you know, you there, and it was the closing ceremony of the 2010 Soccer World Cup. I don't know, but I think that's the first time that a flutist or an instrumentalist has been featured in a closing or opening ceremony. There might have been someone else, but it's very rare. It was a very unlikely opportunity, as a flutist to get that opportunity to perform. And it was a kind of a We Are the World song where everybody got their, 20 seconds in the limelight.
Hmm.
And it was very scary. But what they do with these events, because it's nearly impossible to perform it live because of the slapback in the actual event, the stadium. So you can't hear you play and then a second later your flute comes back at you.
Right.
So it's nearly impossible. So they pre-record the music,
Yeah.
and then you play along, to the music in your ear.
Right.
So at least, I mean, at least that was pre-recorded. But it was an absolutely beautiful moment to be part of South Africa's big event, and to represent South Africa.
And that was before your first Grammy too. I think your first Grammy was in 2014 with Ricky Cash.
That's right. Yeah. So
So
that was pretty early on.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's
It-
already 10 years ago, and the soccer event 15 years ago. Time just flies. It does. It flies right by, whether we like it or not, right?
yeah, it feels like yesterday. It was a huge, absolutely huge event, because my full-time career was pretty young then. But yeah, it was a very strange confluence of events that got me that opportunity. It's just something I'll remember and appreciate forever.
I think last year you were honored with an honorary doctorate of art and design from Chiswana University. Maybe I'm pronouncing that correctly or
Yeah,
incorrectly. I don't know, but you can correct me.
Symphonina University of Technology. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
that was
we were talking just before. I can't do this and not say it. I mean, you and I shared this. We both have honorary doctorates from universities in Pretoria. I did receive one myself for work that I did in artificial intelligence back with machine learning and games, and then probably around 2009 from the University of Pretoria. But it's not, I mean, back to you. It's like, I'm glad we share that, but it's pretty cool. So I have to say, what is the lead up to getting your honorary doctorate? And we did, you went in engineering, so that you didn't go to music school, right? So it must be something
yeah.
special to
So
come back and get an honorary doctorate in art.
yeah, the interesting thing is I studied at the University of Johannesburg, and then after that, I had to do some national service in the military. Everybody we got conscripted. And during my national service, I actually studied at the University of Pretoria, where you got
Huh,
your honorary doctorate.
there you go.
So I studied an honors in engineering at the University of Pretoria, and at the same time, I did the first year of a music diploma at the Tshwane University of Technology. So I did my so in those 2 years of military conscription, I did both the engineering honors and the first year of a music diploma. And after that, I had to go and work back for the company, Anglo American, they called it, that sponsored my studies. And I had to go and work on the coal mines
Mm.
to pay back for my bursary. So I only had, I didn't have more time to finish my course at the Tshwane University of Technology. So it was just a beautiful full circle event to then 40 years later to get an honorary doctorate, to receive an honorary doctorate from that same university where I studied. It is just, but basically they gave me the honorary doctorate for my contributions to music and also for the work that I do to uplift the youth and the children and musicians, young musicians. I try and help young musicians to get out there and get some exposure, and I try and broadcast young musicians' talent to the world.
And we appreciate that too. And you're an advisor to us on the Symphonina Foundation. We appreciate that as well. And congratulations. Were you part of the ceremony then at the honorary doctorate? Did you get to perform? How did that go?
Yeah, I had to give a talk, and as part of my talk, I played the flute as as I would do. I grab any opportunity.
Yeah.
The, the interesting story is that being brought up in classical music, um, I was very, as all classical musicians, you wait till something is perfect. You'd work on years and years and years and years on something, and then you'll have 10 minutes to perform this piece, you know, and it became very stressful. It's very nerve-wracking to have the success of so many years of work depend on one 10-minute audition or performance. Um, and then I went to a friend of mine who was helping people. She does NLP, neuro linguistic programming. And I was like, how do I become less nervous while playing?
Yes,
Because,
tell us.
the flute.
This is a good thing. This is a great question. How do you become less nervous when playing? That's great.
Yeah, so, the flute, everything depends on your breath.
Yeah.
And if your breath is a bit shaky, it just doesn't work well. And then also you hold the flute like this and the flute rests on your lip. And if your lip's a little bit sweaty, then it becomes slippery. And your fingers are on the keys and that's a little bit slippery. So if you're nervous and you're sweating and your breath is not steady, it can be absolutely disastrous. You could work 20 years on something and then on the day of the performance, you could just completely mess it up.
Yeah.
So, and that's the kind of the philosophy of the classical world that I grew up in, is that everything has to be perfect. So that's additional pressure, you know. So, so I said to her, how do I make music as easy as maths? Because I've always found mathematics very easy, but music very hard. So she says, well, the first thing would be to to go and figure out why do you find mathematics so easily. But it's risky to analyze it because Yehudi Menuhin, the famous violinist,
Hmm.
he started thinking about why he was so good at the violin. And the moment he started thinking about it, he never he
Mm.
never reached those same heights again.
Mm.
So it's also risky to to go and analyze
Yeah.
my mathematical talent.
Yeah.
So then she gave me then I said, no, I don't want to explore that. Let me just leave that
Too much anxiety.
intuitive grasp. Yeah, leave it alone. It's
Yeah.
working.
We're trying to
You know,
reduce the
if
anxiety,
it,
not increase it. So yeah.
yeah. So then she said, part of the reason it's so hard in the classical music field is because you work so hard and everything hinges on one event. And what you should do is perform all the time.
Mm.
And because, as a classical musician, if someone says, come play something for us, if you're somewhere and you happen to have your flute there, and some, oh, you play the flute, come play something else. You're never going to say yes because I don't have my accompanist here. I
Yeah.
don't have a guitar or piano player with me. And flute alone doesn't sound that great. And I'm also not ready with my piece yet. And you'll find an excuse not to
Yeah.
not to play it. And she says, whenever you have any opportunity, when anybody asks you or whether they don't ask you, just
Mm.
take your flute out and play. And that's what I did. And it helped a tremendous amount because it changed the whole way you think about it. So instead of, the performance being this one moment that you're working towards, the performance was an everyday activity.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of the stress off. And then it just became much more, once I started doing a lot, it just became much more comfortable. Yeah,
I think there's like that you've captured something about desensitization there too, but not just that. It's a mindset about it too, right? It's not just familiarity, but the mindset of it's
exactly.
just one more time. I guess
And
we could
also
all
the
take
other,
that, Valerie, Rundon, before I forget this, but don't forget what you were going to say. It's like when when we when we play or when we're composing or whatever we're doing, I forget this too, but it's nice to have the recorder on all the time and have it maybe even have a video on all the time if you can do that, so that when it comes time to perform, it's the same. You've already been doing that quote unquote performance to yourself, but at least it's more like what you're going to do as opposed to something special. But go ahead.
yeah, no, that's true. But I also think that it also, if you focus on making the music rather than being perfect, so you focus on playing the music and expressing the music, which is how classical music should be. There is a kind of a philosophy of perfection. And it's kind of an Olympic sport because it's so competitive and everybody is so good, that eventually people use the technical ability to like decide who's the best. But in the end, if you can get the music across, that's what's most important. So that's what I focus when I perform the music. It's not that important technically, but obviously, having practiced all my life in the classical music genre, I've really honed my technique. So technically, I can normally get to, all the elements are already under my fingers. So that just makes it easier. So I don't have to think about the technique. I'm only focused on making the music beautiful.
Yeah, and that's a certain level that you have to get to by putting in all those hours of practice in a meaningful
Exactly.
way over those many years, right? So for sure, yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's part of it. If you practice at this level and you perform at this level, so you're able to do much more in practice. Rafael Nadal, I know you're also a tennis fan,
yeah,
but Rafael Nadal is always practicing. He used to practice very close to the lines. He hit the balls very close to the lines, and in the match situation, he would be playing a more conservative game. So just take it, then it's less nerve-wracking. Then it's easy, you know.
yeah. Right, you're performing
Um,
within yourself as opposed to ask yourself to
yeah,
do something outrageously wonderful under pressure, right? So
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I guess that comes down to also what piece are you performing? Pieces are you performing? Because if you have the selection, if you're world class, then maybe you should perform anything they give you. I don't know what the definition of world class is, but for the rest of us mere mortals who aren't world class, we get some choices maybe about what we want to perform and what level of technical difficulty we want to have. that might distract us
Yeah,
from that expression that you're talking about. So
exactly. Yeah, don't perform something that's right at the edge of your ability. I would say it's much more fun if you perform something that's well within your capabilities. Then you can enjoy it and focus on the music and be less worried about the exact, missing one note somewhere.
yeah, I think that gets back to another thing that someone else told me once is that your practice sessions should never sound as good as your performances because you should be practicing things that are harder than you're going to perform. So that's kind of a
Yeah.
corollary, I guess, right? Don't sound great in practice. If you are, maybe you should up that level so that when you go perform, you're performing below that level and can focus on that the expression of things. What are you working on for 2025 and beyond, Wouter?
I'm working, I've been so involved with this album Trevenia. It took over my life, and there's a lot of collabs, song collaborations that I've been requested to do that I just haven't found time to do. So I'm now working on a few song collaborations,
Wonderful.
following up on those in different genres, some interesting genres, something fresh and playful and new. And so I'm just kind of taking a break from making an album, a full album. I get so involved and so completely immersed that it actually takes a lot out of me to make a full album. It's not just going to the studio and recording it. And, there's so many U-turns, so many dead ends, so many tryouts. People don't see all of that. They say, oh, this sounds nice, but they don't see like you've tried 10 different ways, no, none of which worked. And this is the one that ended up, working in the end.
Yeah, when you're doing an album or even if you're performing on somebody else's work, are you also involved in the post-production engineering, mixing,
Yeah.
mastering, anything, or do you hand it over to audio engineers and say, "Let me know when it's done"? What's your style of working?
No, I'm very involved in every step of the way, from the planning to the composition to the recording. I record all my own flute. I've got a recording studio here at home,
Hmm.
and then I do all the flute editing, and then I get involved with the mixing, mastering, post-production. And it's not because I just find I'm often not happy if I just give it to someone and say, you just do the editing, because people don't have the same kind of, they're not going to spend the kind of time that I will on my flute editing, for example. You know,
Yeah.
I will, I will really go into it and try and make it the most beautiful. And then if I don't like it, I'll just get up the next morning and I'm feeling fresh and good, and I'll just do a few more takes. And so it's a very relaxed uh, time for me when I record. I'm never under pressure. I'm just doing it, and I know I'm recording at home, so I can do another million takes over the
Right.
next month if I want to, until I'm happy with it. But yeah, even the mixing, I find it pretty hard. It's pretty exhausting and agonizing process to get where you want, because you start the album with a certain picture, and to get the actual result to that picture is really hard. I find it very hard, but in the end, I drive everybody crazy around me, but the end result is usually good, so they kind of forgive me and work with me again the next time.
Well, I think after 3 Grammys, you can be forgiven. It's okay. Right. I think that's fair. Wouter, we wish you all the best for everything. Really, it's you're just a gem. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
They can. We have a lot of music videos on YouTube. That's a good way to just get familiar with my music. It's
Mhm.
Wouter Kellerman on YouTube, and obviously everywhere else, Spotify and Apple Music and Instagram and TikTok.
Mhm.
They can send me a Facebook message or an Instagram message, or they could email me at kellermanwouter@gmail.com. kellermanwouter@gmail.com.
Wouter, thank you so much. We're going to listen to some more of your outstanding flute playing on the way out here. And if we can ever be of help to you, just let us know.
Thank you, David. So nice chatting to you. Thanks for everything, and kudos on the amazing work you do to bring the classical music to the wider population and wider audience. And I think you're doing fantastic work on it. and good luck with the rest.
Thank you so much.